and the speed with which it's happened. Are those various populations in each of these countries really set up to create some kind of viable, sustainable transition?
Well, that's a different issue. I mean, there is great potential, obviously, here. It's inspiring. But what will ultimately happen? Can an orderly transition to a democratic order take place? God forbid, or can it lead to chaos? Can it lead to kind of people who have ideas of a new kind of tyranny hijack the agenda or the movement? And I think this is where the world also needs to focus on, how to assist, recognizing that the leverage that the West, the United States, has is limited, that this is really not under anyone's control, but whatever influence one has is to encourage a process that produces successful democratic entities and governments.
Right, a delicate balancing act, though, isn't it? Not to go in and interfere, but to actually encourage them.
Exactly, because there are places where the influence is greater. For example, the influence over Egyptian military that I think the United States exercised was very positive to urge restraint. Now we see with Libya, the U.S. did not have much of an influence relation with the military, and there is a great danger is of fragmentation, of a continuing civil war, of potential division of the country. That is where the world can, I think, play a more helpful role to facilitate that transition that will be more orderly and lead to a democratic order.
Well, let's get another call here. Jerry in Washington, D.C., thanks for your patience. What would you like to ask?
Yes, I'd like to say that I think the Arabs have a lot to be proud of these days in the Middle East, especially with their nonviolence, and that I think the U.S. policy is trying to catch up a pace with what's going on, and they do have a hypocritical policy with Israel. It makes for schizophrenia because the U.S. does want to support democratic forces, and I do think that the many things that Secretary Clinton has been saying for pro-democratic forces in the Middle East and support of the rebels is really wonderful, and I think that the only other thing is that the U.S. I think it was very good that Senators McCain and Lieberman were in Tahrir Square yesterday. I think that's a very good sign.
Okay, Jerry, let me ask the ambassador then. This, you know, obviously this is a delicate role here that America's playing, but this issue that Jerry raised about the Palestinian-Israeli dynamic, the whole thing at the beginning of the show, I was talking about how Barack Obama came in saying there will be no settlements, and of course then the veto was used, sending a totally opposite message, a complete flip-flop, and it must come across as very hypocritical.
Well, I think that on the Israel issue, of course, there is a broad agreement in the United States in terms of strong support for Israel. And there has been a long tradition of arguing that perhaps the UN is not the best place to deal with some of the Arab-Israel issues. It's best done through the direct negotiations between the parties. On occasion, we have either abstained or even have supported action there, but that has been rare. I think the sentiments expressed in the resolution is exactly what the administration supports. I think the president stated, like the previous administration, that it was against new settlements, that they were illegal, and that they were in contravention to the desire for a peace agreement.
But then what is said and what is done are two totally different things.
Well, I think that the doing is sometimes a number of factors get involved, and I was not there, so I don't know what it is. Sometimes some member states do not want a resolution. They want to isolate the United States by putting a word in there that they know will cross a red line for the United States, or it may be that given the Israeli nervousness right now about what's going on in the region, including with Egypt, that this was the timing was an issue that they thought at this time you don't want to put further pressure on Israel. So there may have been various factors, but those are tactical issues. I think on the strategic level, the policy on settlements is quite clear.
Okay, well, two emails I'll put back to back here that we got. One from Junaid Malik, who wrote into our Facebook page. And Junaid says, these revolutions were by the people, for the people. The Israeli-Palestinian issue will probably remain stuck in stalemate. Then a follow-up from Arthur Musazizi, who wrote in saying, America still has a firm grip on the Egyptian military. nothing has changed and Palestinians still are not free to cross the border into Egypt. So again, for what's going on elsewhere in the Middle East, it seems that there'll still be this grinding point with the Israeli-Palestinian situation.
I think it may become even more difficult for the United States as a result of the democratization, which is positive, and I think the U.S., although one could say it was catching up to some degree with events on the ground, is playing a positive role in encouraging governments not to use violence and encouraging Arab governments to reform, to accommodate. But one consequence of democratization is probably going to be that the population of the Arab world is generally takes a tougher view of the Israeli-Palestinian issue than some of the authoritarian leaders do or did. So therefore, I think dealing with a democratic Middle East on this issue, among other positive things that will happen, this is going to be a complicating and a difficult factor.
More pressure on the U.S. on
There will be more pressure, more difficulty, but hopefully one can deal with it effectively through engagement and working even harder to get an Israeli Arab-Palestinian settlement.
Well, less than a minute to go, Ambassador. Will the U.S. accept governments that form in the new Middle East if they are democratically formed? We've seen with Hamas, Hezbollah, that hasn't always been the case.
Sure. Well, of course. I mean, that's one thing is about elections, that the elections have to take place at a time when there is a level playing field politically, where different groups can effectively compete. One idea has been that maybe in some places where elections have happened too quickly and there was not a level playing field that produced results that have not been truly representative. But I think the U.S. Can work with the democratic Middle East, would welcome it. This is something that both works for U.S. interests and for U.S. ideals.
Well, Ambassador, never enough time. I will speak to you again soon, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Great to be with you.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you, and thank you for being with us too. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us feedback on the topics and post your questions and comments. On the next show, women in the revolution. They've been out on the streets making their voices heard, but what role will they get to play in their country's political future? Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time. On the next Riz Khan Show, women in the revolution. They've been out on the streets making their voices heard, but what role will they get to play in their country's political future?
Riz Khan, at this time on Al Jazeera. Business Latest is brought to you by Qatar Gas, delivering energy to the world.